Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. My name is Muhammad Ameruddin bin Mama Roslin and you guys can call me Ame. I'm from Kuliah of Education, majoring in Guidance and Counseling. So today I'm going to explain and give a short brief with all of you what does it mean by ethical relativism. So guys, let's check. First and foremost, we need to understand what does it mean by ethical relativism. Ethical relativism means that there are no absolute truths in ethics and that what is morally right or wrong varies from person to person or from society to society. In this theory, there is no objective that is really right and wrong. This means that what is right from one person doesn't necessarily right from the other person's perspective. Or what is right in some circumstances is not necessarily right from another. But we also need to know that there are few arguments for ethical relativism. Firstly, it comes from the Greek historian, namely Herodotus. Herodotus advanced this view when he observed that different societies have different customs and that each person thinks his own society customs are the best. But there are no set of social customs, Herodotus said, is really better or worse than another. The second argument comes from the Scottish philosophers named David Hume. He claimed that moral beliefs are based on sentiment or emotion rather than on reason. This idea was developed by the 20th century schools and by later philosophers who held that primary function of moral language is not to state facts but to express feelings of approval or disapproval towards some action or to influence the attitudes and actions of the others. On this view, right and wrong are relative to individual preference rather than to social standards. There are two forms of ethical relativism. Firstly, it is the personal or individual ethical relativism, and the other one is the social or cultural ethical relativism. Firstly, let's check it out. What does it mean by personal or individual ethical relativism? Personal or individual ethical relativism holds that the ethical judgment and beliefs are the expression of the moral outlook and attitudes of individual person. These things or this point views that there is no objective standard of right and wrong in as much as the individual person is the basics of the moral judgments. So, what can we highlight from this personal or individual ethical relativism is like this. I have my own point of view and you also have your point of view. Neither my view or yours is better or more correct than another. So, you cannot say that I'm wrong because I have my own point of view and you also have your own point of view, and I cannot say that you are wrong because we both have our own point. The second one is the social or cultural ethical relativism. What does it mean by this point? It means that ethical values and beliefs vary from society to society, and the basis of moral judgment lies in the social or cultural views. In determining the rightness or the wrongness in the human action, one must base it on the norms of particular society. One of the advantages of the ethical relativism is that it allows a wide variety of the ethical or the norms and cultures practice. It also allows people to adapt ethically into that particular society in terms of technology or the cultures or the norms practiced within that society. This is good and valid forms in the ethical relativism. But there is also the disadvantage in this particular or in this ethical relativism. The disadvantage is that the right and wrong, the truth and justice are all relative. Just because a group of people say that this thing is right doesn't mean that it is right. I give you an example. Do you have ever heard the words of slavery? Yeah, slavery. 200 years ago, slavery is becoming a norm and people think that there is no wrong about slavery. But now, we cannot do that kind of things since our norms and cultures and practice and all over the world will say that slavery is a bad thing and people cannot use this kind of cultures or norms into society.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Izzat Fahmi bin Osman and I will be continue this video presentation. Thank you Brother Amir for the explanation about the definition of moral relativism. Okay, for my video, for my parts, I will be talking about the type of position in moral relativism, the two forms of moral relativism, and the concept of ethical relativism versus ethical universalism. Before I move on to the point, I want to pick up a word from Friedrich Nietzsche about moral relativism. He said that you have your way, I have my way. As the right way, it does not exist. So this word is most likely about moral relativism. Let's move on to the point. So, we know that the philosophical theory of relativism claims that what is right or good differs from culture to culture or even from person to person. Moral truth is always relative to a culture or person's particular circumstances, and there are no absolute or objective moral value or principle. Moral relativism can be divided into three different types of positions, which is the first one is descriptive, second one is meta-ethical, and the last one is normative. So, for descriptive relativism is a thesis about cultural diversity. It holds that, as a matter of fact, moral belief and practices vary between culture and sometimes between groups within a single society. For instance, some society condemn homosexuality, others accept it. In some cultures, students who correct a teacher or elder would be thought as disrespectful. Elsewhere, such kind of behavior might be encouraged. For meta-ethical is the position that the truth or the false of moral judgment is not objective, but the justification for moral judgment is related to the tradition, conviction, or practices of an individual or group of people. It is sometimes like a person said something is moral because of he believe it. And for the last one is normative. Normative is the position that because there is no universal moral standard by which we can judge others, we should tolerate or respect the behavior of others or the belief of others, even when it is against our personal or cultural moral standard. For your information, there are two forms of moral relativism, which are the first one is ethical subjectivism and the second one is cultural relativism. Both of these forms deny the existence of moral absolutes. For ethical subjectivism, it is something like morality related to individual, and for cultural relativism, it is something like morality related to culture or the society itself. Cultural relativism are based on two claims, which are diversity thesis and dependency thesis. For diversity thesis, it is something considered morally right and wrong, varies from society with other society, so that there are no moral principles accepted by all societies. Ethical subjectivism claims that moral truths are related to individual personal belief. In other words, morality is subjective. What's good or what's right depends to the person itself. Same as cultural relativism, ethical subjectivism have its own diversity and dependency thesis. The aspect of diversity thesis for this ethical subjectivism is that it is considered morally right and wrong, varies from person to person, so that there are no more principles accepted by all person. And so for the dependency thesis is that all moral principles derive their validity from individual acceptance. I'll give you one simple example about some sort of action in which for any kind of action that we do, it's hard to determine whether the action that we choose is true or false or correct, and it is depending on the situation that we are facing. So the example of situation will be you breaking a promise to give a madman a gun. That is the situation. So for the last part of this video, let us move on to the final part, which is the concept of ethical relativism versus ethical universalism. So the difference between both of these concepts is that ethical relativism holds that there is no kind of action that is always or everywhere and for everyone which is right or wrong. While for ethical universalists, it holds that there are just some, at least one kind of action that is always or everywhere and for everyone to be right and wrong. So in this situation, there are two main things to be highlighted, which is the first one is breaking promise, and the second one is fulfilling or keeping a promise. So we know that fulfilling a promise or keeping a promise is a must do when we are promising, when we are promised with other person, okay, any person, any kind of person, okay. So but in this case, we are dealing with a madman, a crazy man. We knew that if we fulfill the promise, the madman might bring bad consequences to others. He maybe the madman will going to kill you. Maybe the madman will going to kill people around us. Maybe he will kill the cat, kill the dog, kill the birds. So even though you break a promise, which is something people think is a bad thing, but you are doing an action with the intention of preventing someone else from being hurt or harmed by that madman. Okay, so that's all from me for this presentation, for this video presentation. Thank you for watching. That's all from us from Group 2. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.